Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home. All right, so spring is here in full force. We've got past our frost-free date, so planting can run right ahead. And I think some people already have their tomatoes and peppers in the ground, and we're looking to start planting cukes and pumpkins and things like that. So we wanted to talk a little bit today about how to prevent problems with your vegetable crops, mainly what to look for and some steps you can take to find problems. And then we'll talk a little bit about what you can do once you find something.
Normally, when we get a lot of issues coming up in summertime, even like well into the fall, especially with fruit trees and things, even though that's not what we're going to talk about, but it's stuff that could have been prevented or mitigated early on. So now is the time to start doing your scouting, to start fungicide programs, because usually like those late onset diseases kind of are more on the fungus side. But you're right, like we're at the end of May, just beyond our frost free for this area. So the Ohio, West Virginia, I guess mid-Ohio. This is the time of year where people are putting tomatoes in the ground, where people are putting peppers in the ground, pumpkins. This week, next week, everyone's going to be putting those. Corn was planted a week ago. If you're able to get out there, if not, you're going to be planting some corn too.
Yeah, hopefully the fields are dry out.
So everything's going in, and now's the time to stay ahead of any issues that you might have. So we're going to help you figure out what to look for.
Let's talk a little bit about what scouting is, right? So scouting is, you have Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, but then you have crop scouts, right? So crop scouts are, that's when you go out and you're going to be looking for signs or symptoms on the crop that could indicate a potential problem is beginning. Because catching a problem in the beginning is much easier. You have a much easier time to handle it than if you catch it after it's already gone crazy, right?
Yeah, and sometimes it's the only time to catch it or to be able to do something about it.
Right, because, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? So we're going to try to prevent these things from becoming a problem. Now, you already know that airflow and things like that can help prevent problems on your crops. But when you're scouting, this is something that you should really be doing about once a week, going out, looking through your crop, looking for eggs on your plants, immature or adult insects, frass, holes in the crop where they've been chewing. You want to look for discoloration on the leaves, maybe spotting, and make sure you look under the leaves too, because a lot of the insects prefer to hide under the leaf, which makes it harder for you to see right away. And I know that there are some insects, like tomato hornworm, that actually will glow under a black light. So if you go out there in the evening time with a little battery-powered black light, it can help you find some insects as well. But just go out once a week and take a look, go through your fields, sort of like you would do for a soil test where you're going to zigzag through the field and try to get a good look at a variety of locations in the field. If you have a part of your field that maybe gets a little less airflow or is a little bit lower where cool air is going to sit longer, keeping it more moist in the morning, those are sites that you really want to spend a little bit more time on because they're more likely to have a problem.
That's right, especially early on in the spring and as we get into the fall, you're going to have some cooler days, and that cold air is a lot more dense than that warm air, and it tends to roll downhill. So a lot of times, if you plant in valleys, that's where you're going to see some frost damage if your crop is susceptible to it.
Yeah, and another thing you can use in your toolbox for scouting is the NEWA program, NEWA, especially for tree fruits. They can give you an indicator of whether or not the growing degree days have been and the humidity levels are adequate for disease to take place. So that's another tool you can add. But some tools you can just carry around with you would include a hand lens, maybe a piece of paper and a pencil so you can take a tally, maybe some traps. If you want to have, like for spotted wing Drosophila, you would have the little vinegar cup, things like that. But you also, if you do see something, you want to have like a little shovel or a spade or something, a paper bag, something to put your plant and disease insect samples into. Because if you're out in the field and you find something, it's really hard to get back to that exact plant after you go back and get a baggie and a shovel. And then a lot of times, some of the problems we have with plants are in the root system. So it's really helpful for diagnosis to be able to look at the whole plant, including the root system and the soil around it. So just pulling off a leaf isn't always adequate to help us identify what's going on with your plant. Sometimes we need the whole thing.
Yeah, and scouting is one of those things where it's really hard, really overwhelming the first time you do it, early on when you're doing it. And the better you take notes, the better you're going to be at it, the faster it's going to be, the more useful it's going to be. You're going to start noticing what pests come when. Especially, that's going to vary some. There's always a window, but generally speaking, when you're talking about one site, it's a really great way to figure out what you're looking for in the future. So at first, you're going to get a lot of information. You're not going to be sure what's a good bug or what's a bad bug, or is this really going to affect my total yield? Is it worth any kind of intervention that you might do? It might be and it might not be, but the more notes you take, especially in a timeline fashion where you're actually marking what you're finding when, in subsequent years, that's going to be a gold mine of information for you.
Right. And, we've talked in the past about the importance of mapping your fields and, having that farm map with, where you found that disease problem or insect problem is going to be helpful, like Dan was saying. But, those farm maps are so versatile and so useful. It's great to have. Take your basic map, make a couple copies of it, and then you can use them for all sorts of different things around the farm.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and kind of get into a specific crop here. Let's talk about cucumbers. The first thing that you're going to notice with cucumbers, if you've never grown cucumbers, this might not be as intuitive as you think, but cucumbers are one of those plants that have both male and female flowers. And it's cucumbers, it's squash, it's zucchini, it's the cucurbits in general, pumpkins. And early on in that scouting, it's good to make sure that you can identify which ones are the male flowers, which ones are the female flowers. Another important aspect of flowers and cucurbits is that they typically are very dependent on pollinators. So keep that in mind. Having pollinator attractants is a good thing for a pumpkin field, a cucumber field. And you'll kind of want to walk around and see how many female flowers do I have? How many male flowers do I have? If you don't see any female flowers, don't expect to get a lot of cucumbers or pumpkins or whatever cucurbit it is. And, that just goes into planning, as far as the season goes, because if you're not seeing any female flowers, you're not going to get a good harvest. You do have to make sure that you understand that you have a good balance between male and female if you want really good yields for your cucurbit patch.
There are some varieties that are parthenocarpic or self-pollinated. For those, you don't need to have pollinators involved. So if you're growing in a high tunnel or another closed environment, or let's say you have a really heavy cucumber beetle pressure in your area because of where you're growing or what your neighbors are doing, and you don't want to expose your cucumbers to the potential of that blight at the end of the season, or that wilt at the end of the season. Keeping your cucumbers covered with row cover or insect cover from the day you put them out in the field is going to go a long way to help prevent a explosion of cucumber beetle problems later in the summer. Because really we're looking at 2 generations. The first generation has overwintered in the weeds or in your neighbor's garden or wherever, and they're going to come out in the spring the day you put those cucumbers in the ground. They can smell them. They'll come out there, they're going to lay their eggs right next to your cucumber plants so that they know that their babies are going to have adequate food available to them. And then they're going to come out, and then you're going to have a really big population. So delaying planting or covering your plants is really helpful towards reducing cucumber beetle problems.
And that's a great point you just made about the self-propagating varieties or self-pollinating varieties. Just, and it is something to think about. What's that variety that I have, and what are the characteristics of it? Do I need pollinators? And if you need pollinators, you're going to have to keep it open, just like you said, Karen.
But you can still delay opening it. Like the male flowers are going to come on first. So wait for that second flush of flowers and then take the top off.
Yeah, and the best way you can do that is just by scouting and making sure that you're doing things at a proper time, and you're not going to miss that window where you have to get it pollinated. So that's a very good point. Another question would be, when do we see things like the cucumber beetle that you said? According to a lot of my colleagues around the state of Ohio, and this is going to vary some, but generally speaking, you're going to, like you were saying, the eggs get laid, right? And then they hatch. Most infestations will kind of occur in that June, July transition time when it's hot, when things are growing. We're past pollination already. This is a time when things are going to start getting heavy. And then if you hadn't really done anything to prevent that, or if you hadn't thought about maybe using some insecticides before a certain time window, you could have a lot of damage. It could be very hard to recover from that. So just kind of knowing when these insects are laying the eggs, but then also knowing when the major infestations happen will give you an idea of how to fix that. If you're really good at keeping that cucumber beetle away, you won't have to worry about insecticide usage down the road when the eggs hatch and the numbers go up. But if you're not sure whether you caught them or not, or you're growing in a way that could end up with the potential for a cucumber beetle infestation, well, there are things you can use for cucumber beetle control.
Right. When you're out there scouting, another tool you can use is a sticky card. So those yellow sticky cards, you just put them out in various locations amongst the crop. And once the numbers reach 1 beetle for every 2 plants on those sticky cards, that's when you want to start spraying.
Yeah, and one of the things with the cucumber beetle that makes it so notorious is that it can transmit another disease called bacterial wilt. And at that point, the bacterial wilt it's a systemic infection or pathogen that'll just completely destroy your crop quickly. It's not just damaged fruit, damaged leaves, but the cucumber beetle can harbor bacterial wilt, and that in turn could just cause an entire crop of cucumbers to just basically wilt down and fall in the ground and die.
Yeah. And it's all sudden too, just like overnight, all of them are dead, and there's nothing you can do at that point because unfortunately the bacteria got into the plant earlier in the season with that first infestation of cucumber beetles.
Yeah, and how do you prevent that? Like Karen was saying, you could use varieties that don't require as much use of pollinators, keep them covered. Then you're going to prevent those eggs from getting laid in there, and chances are, you might be just fine come July or so when things are growing rapidly, cucumber beetles are coming out, and it just destroys your crop. And losing a crop in July makes it really hard to recover from.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking too.
And then another bad one for most cucurbits is the squash vine borer. A little bit different. These guys will lay eggs at the base of the stems, and you'll see the adults, and the adults don't do much, but the larvae that come out of those eggs will basically tunnel through the stems, those large stems of cucurbits, and it'll just eat away at the vascular tissue and cause it to collapse too. When those larvae get inside the plant, getting rid of them is nearly impossible. Like, what are you going to do to be able to hit a plant with an insecticide when that insect is inside the plant causing all the damage? It's housed, it's protected from anything that you put on it. So it becomes another insect that can just devastate a crop if left unchecked.
Yeah.
And then another bad one, squash bugs lay these white eggs, and they turn this bronze color. So they're laid white and they turn bronze. But if you start seeing bronze eggs on the leaves of your cucurbit plant,
so you have your striped cucumber beetle or your spotted cucumber beetle, you have your squash vine borers, and then you have your squash bugs. So there are a lot of insects out there that cause a lot of harm to our cucurbits.
Yeah, just, I guess, finding eggs and being able to take a picture of the egg, identifying the egg. Now, if there's any way to get a jump start on a pest, it's identifying the egg.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
That is something that's going to happen early. That is something that's going to happen before you get a lot of disease or even any damage at all. So flipping over those leaves, doing your scouting weekly, and then finding something, and then just doing some investigation, contact your extension office. We have timetables for just about anything as far as a pest goes, because this is the kind of data we collect. So, we could narrow it down to some really high likelihoods of a potential pest. And then you can, one, destroy as many of the eggs as you see to knock down the population. And then two, have the products in hand to deal with the pests that you miss from your egg scouting and egg destruction.
Yeah, this is true. And, the frustrating thing is if you are busy in the spring and you miss these signs and symptoms, it's really hard to make up that ground. And so when late summer comes around and you've got squash bugs all over everything, it's really too late to do anything about that, because they've already done the damage that they're going to do. And, treating that late summer, early fall population might make you feel good, but it's not going to do a lot to help save your crop. So, that's the frustrating thing is, when you look out and everything is dying because it's got cucumber beetles or wilt or whatever, these are all problems that you really, unfortunately, needed to deal with a few months back. So now is the time, people. Get out there, look through the crop, make sure that you are identifying any potential problems that are out there. There's actually, if you have squash vine borer problems, there's actually some pheromone traps that you can use to get an idea of how bad your population is. There are some systemic insecticides that you can use for squash vine borer, but again, this is an insect that overwinters in the soil and it's already there. So crop rotation is going to be a big step into preventing that particular problem.
Right. Crop rotation, using varieties that are more resistant to certain diseases like bacterial wilt. I can't think of anything that's going to be 100%, but I'm sure things are more susceptible than others, just like with just about any type of crop and varieties. But also, you got to think not only insect diseases, but you also have fungal diseases, right? You have downy mildew and powdery mildew. Downy mildew is a lot more aggressive, a lot more harmful in cucurbits, but powdery mildew also, along with the scouting, are things that if you see it, you can't necessarily reverse and cure it, but if you spot it early, what you can do is essentially contain it with the use of fungicides. Remember, fungicides are usually preventative. They're rarely curative, but by scouting and identifying, I'm starting to get some powdery mildew in this crop. Maybe I should start using some products to basically contain that powdery mildew so it doesn't spread, so it doesn't affect your yields, keeps your fruit looking good, and then there you go, another successful season. Why? Because you've scouted, you've identified the problem early, and you've implemented mitigation corrections, in this case, a fungicide, to help with the problem. But you wouldn't have discovered it without the scouting. So, scouting goes for just about every disease that I can think of, whether it's an insect, whether it's fungal, weeds, scouting. It's easy to pull a weed when it's really small and before it goes to seed.
Oh, yeah.
So scouting is one of those things that it's tedious, but will actually save you so much work in the long run.
And money, too, because it'll save your crop. I want to go ahead and plug a really great publication that's available online that has some great references to it. So it has crop pest scouting sheets and gives you a good outline for scouting your field. And this is from Michigan State University. It was written by Ben Worling, and it's Integrated Pest Management Scouting and Vegetable Crops. It's a really great publication. It's not too long of a read. But again, there's some great links to scouting sheets and things like that. And then also find out what your local university has as far as a diagnostic laboratory and what kind of diagnostic services are available to you. So if you do find something where you found a pest on your crop or you have found a disease on your crop, you're not quite sure what it is, treating it before you know what it is can oftentimes cause more problems down the road because you're treating something with one chemical and it can't be affected by that chemical. So for instance, if you're trying to treat a bacterial disease with a fungicide, nothing is going to happen, right? You've just wasted money and effort on this plant and haven't had a positive outcome. So it's really important to be able to identify what your problem is. And so, we're all learning every day. And we don't expect yourself to know what everything is right off the bat. You'll get things as you go, and every time you have to deal with a disease, you'll learn more about it, right? But if you aren't sure what it is, always ask for a second opinion. Get a diagnostic test done. Take the insect into your extension lab or, contact your local plant pathology lab, find out what services are available and use those services. It's really helpful. And that's what we're here for. We are paid for by your tax dollars to help you. So support your local extension offices and let us help you.
Yeah, and I'll tell you one thing, just kind of going back to the first thing we said about spacing, we kind of glossed over that point, but
We
really
did.
a lot of diseases are just prevented by proper spacing between rows, between plants. That kind of that cultural practice of spacing and allowing wind and light infiltration into a garden
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
will do wonders. So it starts there. It starts before you even have a crop.
Light, airflow, and good nutrition. And good drainage. Those are all things that are right up front. Those are the first questions that we ask whenever you have a plant problem. Like, okay, what's the drainage like? What's the wind flow like? Trying to find out if there is an abiotic problem that is contributing to your biotic problem. So these are all important things to keep in mind. And before we run out of time today, I did want to plug a couple upcoming programs that we're having here in the Ohio Valley. And on June 3rd, we're having a Raising Poultry for Profit workshop. It is $30 to register for the first person and $15 if you want to bring some additional family members. There's a whole lot of great giveaways at this program, as well as great information. So I do encourage you to look into that. On June 10th, we're having a small perennial fruit production with a focus on brambles and blueberries. Again, lots of freebies to give away, same registration fee. And on July 8th, we're going to have a small ruminant health and pasture management workshop. And those are all through the WVU Extension Service here in Ohio County. And Dan, you guys have a cool plant swap coming up, right?
That's right. Yeah, we have a plant swap coming up on Tuesday, June 14th. It'll be at the Belmont County Fairgrounds at 6 p.m. You basically, when you divide your plants right now, what you're doing after, whether you have irises, a lot of bulbs are a great time to, this is after they flower, you start dividing them up, put them into pots, get them ready to go. We're under a month away from June 14th at 6 p.m., but to bring them to the Belmont County Fairgrounds. You can label them. Ideally, you should label them for best results.
Mystery
If
plant.
not, and here's the thing, if not, we can help you, but I mean, you're typically going to be the owners of these plants and the best source for that information, but we're here to help as well, the Belmont County Master Gardeners. So we'll do a plant swap where you basically take the same amount of plants that you brought. So if you bring in 5 or 6 types of things to put out there, we categorize them, and then you'll take turns and you get to pick something else, and they'll all be labeled. So hopefully you'll go home with something new, with something different. You kind of plant it, and hopefully you will be able to enjoy them by the following year. And then once you like that, you'll be able to do it again next year. and it's just a great way to kind of save some money, get some new plants out there, and dividing plants. It's one of those things where underutilized as far as the potential it has for perennial growth.
Yeah, and you want to talk about good plant health. When you have certain plants that cluster together like that, their health will decline over time if you don't divide them. So yeah, definitely. I mean, rhubarb is a prime example too. Once it gets crowded, it'll start bolting earlier. So you just got to get in there, divide it, and go to the plant swap.
That's right. And if you love rhubarb, go to the plant swap as well and bring your tulips. but it works out great. It's a lot of fun. Just a great program.
And while you're there, check out the Master Gardeners, and maybe you want to become a member.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you're going there, it's because you got a passion and you're going to be around the people with the same passion. Just a good time, good weather. Fairgrounds are just a fun place to be, and it's a great way to spend an afternoon. So that is June 14th at the Belmont County Fairgrounds at 6 p.m. The Belmont County Plant Swap. And it's also on the Belmont County Master Gardeners Facebook page, so feel free to check it out.
And check out our Ohio County Extension website or Facebook page if you want to learn more about our upcoming events and programs, or you can always give us a call at the office at 304-234-3673. That's 304-234-3673.
Yeah, and if you want to give the Belmont County Extension offices, Belmont County, Ohio, you can reach us at 740-695-1455. So that is the Ohio State Extension Office in Belmont County, 740-695-1455.
Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.